Hey guys, this is Raven with the Regal Reptile, and today we're going to talk all about bearded dragons. So you're going to see a lot of Maxwell in this video. This is a quick care guide for the bearded dragon because I know a lot of you guys got beardies for Christmas or something else. You just happen to have bearded dragons, and I would love to help you guys get the best possible start for you and your new pet so that you guys can have several years together of happiness. Today in the video, we're going to talk about cage and cage sizes, heat and temperature, lighting, food, and a couple of extra notes at the end. I hope you guys find this video helpful, and without further ado, let's talk about where your bearded dragon's going to live.
Oh, you've got a bearded dragon. Now what? Well, first, you need a nice place for your bearded dragon to live. So let's go downstairs into the basement and talk about some cage sizes and why they are or not very good choices for your bearded dragon. Here we are, and the first cage I want to talk about is the 20-gallon long tank, which is clearly just for axolotls. I'm just kidding. 20-gallon longs are 30 inches wide, 12 inches deep, and 12 inches high. They are not very good for bearded dragons, but if you have a baby bearded dragon or you got this tank with your bearded dragon, your baby bearded dragon, they will do for a baby bearded dragon. Baby bearded dragons grow up very quickly though, so you don't want to keep one in this tank for more than a few months. Let's upgrade. Here we have Caldera's tank, the corn snake, which is a 40-gallon breeder tank. This tank is 3 feet long, I believe 18 inches deep and 16 inches high. This tank is the bare minimum size requirements for bearded dragons. So if you happen to have this tank with your bearded dragon, or this is the only thing you can afford, that's okay. Bigger is always better, and the recommended for bearded dragons is actually a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot tank. But again, if this is the thing you got and you want to keep it that way, that's okay. Make sure though that you have a good heat gradient in the tank, and we're about to talk about heat gradients. On a side note, a 4 by 2 by 2 enclosure is not usually sold at pet stores, so you'll have to buy a custom enclosure or build one yourself. I may be building some enclosures soon, so when I start doing that, I'll try to video it and put it up on YouTube for you guys. So now that we've talked about cage size, let's go on to temperature gradients. And what a temperature gradient is the difference between the highest and lowest temperature in your enclosure. What are you doing, Maxwell? Reptiles are exotherms, which means they get their heat from the temperature around them. They don't make their own heat like we do. So it's very important that they have a range of temperatures to choose from in their enclosure so they can feel comfortable. A good temperature gradient for a bearded dragon, like a baby, would be 110 at their basking spot to about low to mid 80s in their cool spot. So on one end of the cage it's really hot, especially at their basking spot, and on the other end of their cage it's really cool. Well, not really cool, but cool. You know, they're desert animals. Let's check what Maxwell's temperatures are. It's time to introduce an accessory that every reptile owner should have, and that is a laser thermometer. This is a temperature reader that will read the surface temperature of anything at the end of their little laser. So it's really useful. So we'll check the basking temperature, which is a raised platform underneath a big basking light. You want a raised platform because they like to stay on a raised platform when they're basking. So you just push the button and we'll see what it is. 101 degrees. That is nice. That's a good, nice basking temperature for an adult bearded dragon. Let's look at the other side. While he's running around and acting silly, His cooler side is around 79 degrees, which is totally fine for an adult bearded dragon. And in his hide, it is 74, which is really great because, you know, he might want to hide and cool off. He also, if you noticed, hello, has a hide on his other side, which is kind of taken up by his salad bowl, but he can still hide under there. So you want two hides in your bearded dragon cage. You want one on the warm side and one on the cool side. Again, that temperature gradient for bearded dragon babies is a 110 basking spot to 80s to mid 80s. And for adults, you're going to want to lower that basking spot to probably around upper 90s to 100 degrees, and then upper 70s to low 80s in the cool side of the cage. Speaking of heat lights, let's talk about lighting in general. Bearded dragons need two types of lights in their enclosure. The first is the heat light, which gives the bearded dragon heat and energy. The second is a UVB light. Bearded dragons spend a lot of their time basking out in the sun, and while they get heat from the sun, they also get UV radiation, which is also good for people. This UV radiation helps them metabolize calcium and build strong bones. Without this UV light, they can come down with something called metabolic bone disease, or MBD. This can cause your reptile to become deformed, have weak bones, and even die. It's not very pretty. So in order to avoid that, we need a UVB light as well. There are several UVB lights on the market, so it's really easy to get the wrong kind, but hopefully we can talk about some lights you don't want to get and then talk about the lights you do want to get. The first light I want to talk about is one that usually comes in the Bearded Dragon kit. By the way, try to avoid the Bearded Dragon kit. This light is called a coil UVB light, and it is not suitable for bearded dragons. Its UV light doesn't go very far into the cage, so in order for your bearded dragon to get any, they have to be right underneath the light, which also puts them right next to the heat light as well, and that can cause burns. The next light I want to talk about is called the compact fluorescent UVB light, and it has the same problem as the coil bulb. The UV doesn't reach very far into the cage, and even though it's positioned sideways so it's a little longer, your bearded dragon still has to get very close to that light to get any UV to benefit its bones. But these are the lights at the pet store, I hear you say. Where do I get the ones I'm supposed to have? Well, most of the lights you're going to want are found online. I don't have footage of these next couple of light bulbs, so here's Ori for your enjoyment. Hi, Ori. A good option is the ZooMed T8 10.0 Desert UVB tube light. Another really good option and a better option is the ZooMed T5 HO 10.0 Desert Linear UVB light. HO stands for high output, and T5s are generally better than T8s. But the best light I have found on the market by far, and the one that I use in all of my cages, is the Arcadia T5 HO 12% Desert Linear Fluorescent. Unlike the coil bulb, these linear fluorescents cover a good portion of your cage, and the UV light penetrates very deep in the cage itself. You can get the Arcadia brand light fixture, or you can even get a T5HO light fixture at Lowe's or Home Depot or Home Improvement store, because a lot of bulbs fit in it, and also plant bulbs and stuff will fit in it, and you might get it for a cheaper price. I spent a lot of time on lights because lights are incredibly important. A lot of people get the bearded dragon kits and say that the smaller compact fluorescents are fine for babies, but when do bearded dragons do the most growing? And when do they make the most bone? When they're babies. So I believe it's highly important that above almost everything else, you try your very best to get a T8 or a T5 HO UVB light for your bearded dragon as soon as you possibly can. The T5 light you do need to replace every 9 months because even though the light is still on, the UV radiation decays over time. The T8 lights are a little less expensive, but you have to replace those every 6 months. So it's kind of a push-pull thing. With that out of the way, if you have any lighting questions, please leave them in the description. Lighting is so important. Let's talk about food. You're going to want to feed baby bearded dragons mostly bugs and insects. You can feed bearded dragons mealworms, superworms, dubia roaches, crickets, and a number of other feeding insects. However, as they get older, you're going to want to shift from insects to mostly salads. And sometimes they just don't want to eat salads. Why not? Why not, Max? Greens are good for you. Another thing you'll need is supplements, mainly calcium and multivitamins. You're going to want to dust your food with calcium every day and with multivitamins once every 2 weeks. For some final notes, I want to go back to heating because a lot of people want to use these red bulbs to heat their enclosures at night, claiming reptiles cannot see the color red, but they can. And any light at night will disturb the reptile's sleeping habits, and that's not a really good idea to do for your bearded dragon. If you really feel like they need heat at night, you can get something called a ceramic heat emitter, like this one. It just gets really hot, and it doesn't put off any light. That being said, be very careful because you don't want to grab it and it being on and you don't know it's on because it doesn't light up. However, unless your house gets below 60 degrees at night, you don't need heat at all. It's actually good for bearded dragons to have a drop in temperature at night, as that's what would happen in the wild. Another question a lot of people have is, does my bearded dragon need a friend? Or can 2 bearded dragons live together? And the answer is no. Bearded dragons are solitary animals, and while there may be 1 or 2 of you that have successfully cohabitated bearded dragons, it is not at all for beginners. Please do not try it unless you have an insanely huge tank, because this can happen. Now, this bearded dragon was actually dropped at the pet store by somebody, and we got her as a rescue at Echoes of Nature, and she had to have her tail amputated. But I just want to show you that bearded dragons can lose their tails or limbs or even their lives. If bearded dragons are sitting on top of each other and it looks like they're cute and cuddling, they're not. They're trying to soak up as much heat and UVB to outcompete the other bearded dragons in the tank. Please, if you have 2 bearded dragons or even 3 that someone has given you, all of the setup things I told you earlier in the video, you're going to have to do for all 3 of those bearded dragons. I'd like to round out this video by saying that if you do have a bearded dragon or you got a bearded dragon for your kid for Christmas, it's still your responsibility to take care of that bearded dragon. Please do not, under any circumstances, release your bearded dragon into the wild if you find you cannot take care of it. And if you really find you can't take care of it, please take it to a shelter. But do everything you can to take care of the animal that you purchased or were given. And I know you guys all want to do the best for your animals. So I really hope this video was helpful and will help give you and your bearded dragon a great start to many years of happiness. Have a wonderful rest of your day. If you have any questions about anything mentioned in this video, please comment in the comment section. I will be happy to answer them for you. See y'all